And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Sunday mornings, flying weather showing IFR here with that front back out here to the west and then improving quite a bit. Good VFR for the western Bering Sea there, but IFR extending into the interior here all the way up to the Canadian border on the south side of the Brooks Range, covering the central western North Slope and Arctic coast, Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Valley down across Kodiak, on up into the Gulf and well into the Copper River Basin here, and across the Kenai Peninsula and the Panhandle, all looking IFR to start the day tomorrow. And a little bit of change, but not much here for Sunday afternoon. A lot of IFR over the central western interior, again, northeastward there across the Yukon Flats on the south slopes of the Brooks Range. IFR up here for the North Slope and Arctic coast, a little farther to the east now, still extending back into the Chukchi Sea. Northern Bering Sea IFR right on down into Togiak Bay to about Dillingham, on up into the Kuskokwim Valley central interior areas. And then IFR looks like the Alaska Range southward across the Mananuska-Susitna Valley, western Cook Inlet, northern Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, marginal VFR to Kodiak Island looking marginal. And southern Copper River Basin still IFR, especially along the Coast Range into the eastern North Gulf Coast. And most of the Panhandle still IFR, but western Alaska Peninsula, Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians, all the way out to Erickson Air Force Base, VFR. And then marginal VFR still holding out here well to the west, though otherwise pretty good over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Alaska Peninsula now, Nunivak Island, VFR mostly, Pribilof, southwest coast. IFR pretty well entrenched here over the northern part of the state, all the way down into the northern Yukon Delta there, extending across the northern Kuskokwim Valley and the Alaska Range here, upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, marginal VFR with maybe some VFR, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, eastern Kenai Peninsula, Passage Canal, eastern Turnagain Arm, IFR, that extends eastward there across Cordova and into Yakutat, covering all of the Panhandle once again. VFR there for Kodiak Island. And for the afternoon, big improvement here over the interior. Just some scattered areas of marginal VFR with isolated IFR, and even improving here on the eastern North Gulf Coast, becoming marginal VFR from Prince William Sound to Yakutat. Eastern half of the Panhandle, IFR, western half marginal. Good VFR out to the west again. Still a lot of IFR there along the south slopes of the Brooks Range and up along the Arctic coast, but none to speak of out here, at least in the forecast for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And for Anatuvik for Sunday, or IFR for that pass, go marginal for Adigan, a little bit better as you head east there. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, looks like an IFR day for both passes there. Same forecast for rainy, windy, IFR, Isabel, same thing, IFR, and Mentasta, marginal VFR. For Tanita, IFR, Portage, IFR, Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels here about 4,000 to 6,000 feet across the Panhandle, 2,000 feet right up along the North Gulf Coast, then extending all the way up there to the through the Bering Strait and into the southern Chukchi Sea, 4,000 feet here into the eastern Aleutians. And icing front and the front and the low pressure area coming in brings an area of considerable moderate rime icing here across the northern Bering Sea, St. Matthew Island, Nunivak Island, along the southwest coast, pushing into Bristol Bay there, and up towards Sitkinak, southwest Kodiak Island. Eastern interior areas of isolated moderate rime icing there. And for the Panhandle, a little heavier moisture will lead to considerable moderate rime icing across much of the area there, all the way up to Yakutat and a little to the west. And the jet stream here showing pretty good southwesterlies at 100 knots, again, right across Yakutat and down the north coast of the southeast coast. Lighter, much lighter over the interior, southerlies at about 65 knots here in toward the southwest coast, turn southeast 65 for Nunivak Island, and then good westerlies here with the strongest jet there just south of the Aleutians up to 120 knots. 9,000 feet here, low pressure tracking into the northern Bering Sea. So westerlies 50 to 65 knots along the Aleutians there, about 50 knots over the southern Bering Sea, lighter and more southerly over the interior, and 55 knots out of the southwest over the eastern Alaska Range. And that same thing going on here for the northern panhandle, but much lighter on down the coastline. 3,000 feet south to north winds here, strongest on the north coast. There at about 50 knots. Lighter over interior Alaska once again down into the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound. And then this low that developed on that frontal boundary here, tracking northeastward, bringing 55 to 60 knot winds around that as it comes up toward Nunivak Island and Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coastline there. Otherwise, the Aleutians, 45 to 55 knot westerlies. Turbulence-wise, look for considerable moderate turbulence here, especially with that new storm coming in across the southwest part of the state, Bristol Bay, all the way into southwest Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, out to about Atka Island with light to Haisley and moderate chop west of there, or turbulence. And for the north coast of the Panhandle, considerable moderate turbulence there in the narrow area with those stronger winds from about Sitka, maybe as far south as Port Alexander, up in toward Elfin Cove